computer and we're broadcasting. It is my pleasure today to welcome a man who is a great leader within our Jewish community and who I have the pleasure to have as a friend, Rabbi Yakov Horowitz. Rabbi Horowitz is a true innovator in Jewish education, but perhaps one of the most fascinating areas is in the way he has helped people with children at risk. And we'll talk about that in a lot of different ways. And we'll also hopefully touch on today his new Gemara book, the curriculum that he's been working on, which the way I always see it is one of the ways of reducing children at risk in our community as well. So Rabbi Horowitz, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, Rabbi Lenny, it's always a pleasure. I'm looking at the virtual shul in the background, and I had the great zchus of being there twice, of lecturing there twice. It was absolutely, both Shabbos were delightful.
And I look forward to having you back and to soon be able to give you a big hug as well.
Amen.
Not just virtual ones.
I'll drink to that.
Amen. So, Rabbi,
this is water, not vodka. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Let me start with some simple questions. Just, you know, a lot of people know of your great work, but it's always been amazing to me that you're a person, you went to Tarvadas, you were very close with the Rav Pam, obviously you're from a Hasidic background, and that you've been able to cross all sorts of boundaries in our community. I remember when you were with me at a conference from Yeshiva University as well. How did you make that shift? How were you able to walk in so many different worlds so successfully?
That's a great question. And it's one of the things that I'm proud of, that my wife, Odi, and I we raised our children to be, not to be put in about, to be their own people and to respect everyone and take good from all community. By the way, that's how Tarvadas was, It was, I believe there was a great influence of Rav Feivel Mendelovich, Rabbi Mendelowitz. Virtually every one of them, he died in 1948, but he was the visionary leader of Tarvadas, and his philosophy really was, like the Rambam says, take truth from everyone. And every single one of my Rabbeim was Talmidim of his for many years. And it was as if I got to know him through his Talmidim. It was something that, but then as I got into advocacy and working with abuse victims and teens at risk, when people ask me who do you work with, like what kind of kids, so I always say, my standard answer is, I learned from the Malach HaMavos, from the angel of death. He doesn't differentiate. God forbid, when people have problems, the kids who are passing around a joint or worse don't care where they came from at all. And you go to these recovery retreats, nobody cares. And I just try to live my life like that. It's not always easy. Sometimes you have to dance between the raindrops, but thank you very much for starting with that. Thank you.
No, it's one of the most amazing things, because there are people who have connections, and yet you have acceptance across a very wide spectrum. Your book that you came out regarding children's safety against abuse, how many different versions are there now?
We have 4. And we're, Baruch Hashem, in over 110,000 homes between the versions.
Wow.
We have an English version called Let's Stay Safe. The second book we did was a book in Yiddish, which, honest to goodness, I made it together with the Satmar community in Monroe. I went to one of the leaders there and I said, look, I'm making a Yiddish book. I would love it to be congruent with whatever the culture, the style, everything. I said, I'll change anything. It's not about me. And we redid the whole book and put it in Yiddish, and they took over 7,000 copies.
Wow.
And then we have a book in Yiddish, in Hebrew for the Haredi community, and that's called Levetach. Sei Gesund is the book in Yiddish. Levetach, Masha Batuach Batuach is the Haredi version. And about a year and a half ago, we just released the Tilui version called Levetach.
Really? Wow.
And the idea is the pictures correspond to, we redid the pictures. The idea is that everything should look like their life. Mm-hmm. So our daughter Leah was in Israel when we started the the book, she literally took the English book and said, okay, I need a street corner. I need a kitchen. She knocked on a few doors. Can I take pictures, to get the tiles right and the pictures? It was very important for us for the messages.
That's amazing. And in terms of our world today, our Jewish world, our general world, are we in a better place with the children at risk? Is it still growing? Where do you see things happening today?
I think it's much, much better. It's much better. Look, we in every, almost in every area of life, we go through an uncomfortable phase where people, you go through the discomfort of talking about an issue that nobody wants to talk about. And it seems to be getting worse for years. And I'll take the issue of child sexual abuse or teens at risk, or even, mental wellness in today's environment. Thankfully now it's becoming more, look at mental wellness. And, 10, 20 years ago, chas v'shalom, if someone took their own life, if someone had a child or a young adult, it was written off as an aneurysm, right? People, and nobody wanted to pry, but, people knew, whoever knew, but it was just, in the public, they told that he just died, you don't know what happened. And today, in the most Haredi circles, I've been, unfortunately, at too many of those shiva homes, and the parents say, our son struggled with depression, or our son is bipolar, and or he had an addiction. They talk more openly about it. So obviously, you start finding out, when people talk about something, you start finding out more about it. There are more cases of abuse, or teens at risk, or people suffering from mental wellness issues once you talk about it, eating disorders. So it gets worse for a while, and then everybody that was reluctant to those who were opposed to the change are saying, I told you this is a terrible idea. Look what you're doing. It's so much worse than it was. It's not worse. We just found out about it now. But then it starts getting better.
Was part of the function because our expectations had shifted to such a narrow band of what's considered success, whether it's financial or religious, you have to look like this, you have to do this, or were there other things that were going on?
I think it's part of it. I think it's definitely part of it. And the good part is that today's parents are parenting in ways that our parents, I don't know yours. I met your mom, I believe, right?
Yes. She may be online right now.
Well,
So be careful. She's good.
I remember I gave you a compliment. Mrs. Matenki, if you're on, your son rocks. He's a superstar. I love talking to him. But the truth is that our parents' generation really didn't know much about what we were doing. Is that a fair statement?
Probably.
Oh, certainly less than today.
Yeah.
So, when we grew up, when adults had a conversation, it wasn't appropriate for you to mix in or to talk. It was more of a European model. Even today, if you go to London, or I'm generalizing, but there's typically more of a hierarchy in schools, and we American, the culture is not like this. So I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that parents today are more aware of what's going on, and awareness, and the fact that we've been talking about it, I think also certainly helps. But I think it's a healthy process that's grueling, that's really painful.
Now you do a lot of parenting classes, and you talk to parents. What if you had to give your 2 or 3 top pieces of advice to parents about children today, what would they be?
Have a happy home. Be flexible. And when you have an issue, consider it a family issue, not this kid's issue. I would say,
expand on that last one a little bit more.
When people come to me, Reb Lenny, and I wish I had the time. I don't really have that much time to deal with individual families. But when people come and start talking about the kid, Reb Lenny, I promise you, I can usually tell within 3 minutes, 5 minutes, if the kid's going to make it. And I'm sorry?
I'm amazed. I'm amazed, but I know
And sometimes make it means that the parents go through the hell for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
But the ones who come in and say, Rabbi Horowitz, we're having a problem in our family, or, you know, our child is having an issue, and we will do whatever it takes for him or her. We're behind him or her, and we're going to make it work. Please to give some advice. And they talk stuff like that, and they're flexible, and they don't care about what the neighbors say if their child needs something different. Those kids make it somehow. If you asked me, you know, if I was an actuary and putting statistics out, I think I'd have a pretty good handle on them. When parents come in and say, I cringe, Rabbi Lenny, you know, I'm a straight shooter. I don't say anything to parents who are in pain, but they come in and they say something like, our first two children, such nachas, and this one. And I say, no, please don't think like this, please. You have a child that's different. You have a child that needs something different. Don't do this, please. And some try to think of it differently, and many don't. And then, excuse me, you know, it becomes a blame game on the child. And, you know, I hear things like, you know, when our daughter's not home for Shabbos, like the whole house is different. And it might be true. It might be true. You know, nothing prepares you for raising an out-of-the-box, you know, kid that's not playing school well, or has learning disabilities, or has anything else. It's terrible. The nachas is, you know, when you see it long term, and funny, it's very similar, parallel to what you said about the communal stuff. I had tremendous nachas, a child whose parents went through years and years of unspeakable pain and confusion. In the last, you know, year or two, was actually having a grandchild from this child.
Wow.
And you know, I said, so the mother tells me, she says, Rabbi Horowitz, you always tell me that the grandkids are God's reward for not strangling the teenagers. You know, but I always say, stay in the game, just stay in the game. And what happens is, it's fascinating. At one of the weddings of someone who was, I was recently at a wedding, thank God, married a lovely girl, went through a very, very difficult phase. And I never talk, but the friends all knew that I was coaching the family. And a few people came over to me at the table and said, like, what's the one thing that basically what you said, what's your takeaway from all of this? What do we need to know as parents? So I said, I'm not discussing this child. I don't talk about who I talk to or who I don't. But the thing I would tell you is, the hardest time when dealing with a kid like this is the first 6, 12, 24 months. Because you tell the child, talk to us about anything. And they do. And you give them more space because you know you have to. So it actually does get worse. The things that they've been hiding from you, they do out in public. And you take them for therapy, which brings about tremendous churn. So, you know, I said the hardest time is the beginning, when you're following the advice of people who are guiding you, and it just seems to be getting worse. And I keep getting contact from the parents who are going through this. They say, Rabbi Horowitz, please, it's worse. It's much worse than it is. I said, please hang in there.
Well, so let me switch for a moment, and let's go over to, as opposed to the children at risk, the educational things you've been doing. You founded a yeshiva.
My first love.
You founded a yeshiva. You were active every single moment of that yeshiva in its founding. You were the first director of Project Yes. And over the last several years, you've been starting to address the question of Gemara learning. Why'd you pick Gemara, and how are you viewing the learning of Gemara differently?
Another great question. we're launching a new website soon, and I had to come with a tagline. So I wrote what it is. It's went through many iterations of it. It says, identify, advocate, prevent. I was trying to tie together what I do, identify an issue that people aren't talking about, advocate, talk about it. And then I just naturally, once other organizations step in and there are more resources and people are talking about it more, I always want to prevent them. So hence the child safety book and the classes and safety classes and parenting classes. But I've always felt that, I started as an 8th grade Rabbi my first students are 52 years old now. 51, excuse me. My first students, I just turned 61 now. So I started right out of Kollel, and many of the years I volunteered for the Weakest Track, and I just saw that educationally, I've been saying this all my adult life, that educationally, I'm talking about any of the social stuff, I think it is the number one reason why kids abandon religion is when they just get frustrated with Gemara. The low ball number, you ask off the record, any principal in the world, high school, Medrash, you ask them what percentage of your kids absolutely know nothing about Gemara. No one who's semi-honest will tell you less than a third. It's more than that. And what happens is, it's complicated text in a foreign language. If you take the emotion out of it, it's complicated text in a foreign language with no punctuation, and you're teaching it to 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds. So, I wrote many articles about it, about this. One of the more famous one of that one is it doesn't start in 10th grade. And what happens is the kids, they fall behind a bit, and the train is off, and then they get frustrated after a while, and they just throw up their hands, and they just say, it's not for me. When I went to Tarvadas, he said, Tarvadas, in 12th grade, we learn Gemara 2 hours a day. They don't tell you that. 2 hours, Reb Lenny, I'm not kidding. 2 hours a day. The rest was voluntary. And my class, Rabbi Yisrael Reisman was a year older than me, Rabbi Shachni Weinberger, Rabbi Baroliner, all Rosh Yeshiva, I was running around in the hallways, but they were sitting learning. So whoever wanted to, we got dismissed at 6 o'clock. The serious guys went to the base medrash. I went to play ball. But I'm saying it was set so the kids learn Gemara so much that if they don't, it's like a portal to religion now.
So why isn't it, the Maharal railed against all of these things? So this isn't a new challenge that we have. Instead of why, I grew up, and the Balabatim, the simple Balabatim in Shul were not learning Daf Yomi, they were learning Ein Yakov.
Right.
Right. Stories, which you can learn a tremendous amount of Musar from. And then somewhere along the line, everyone had to be in the same track to become a major Talmud Chacham. Instead of the battle you're having now of trying to make Gemara more accessible for the weaker students who may never use it again, why are we trying to say, let's go back to an hour a day, a half hour a day, a little bit, Mitsuyanim, the top, let them get the
Reb Lenny, it's respectfully, it's not for the weaker kids, it's for all the kids. Some kids can function despite the fact that they're missing basics. Look, I love the golf, okay? You put me on the course, I taught myself. I never took a lesson. I actually took one very recently, but you put me on a course, I played with foursomes, I can tell you in 2 minutes who took lessons. So what do they teach you? They teach you fundamentals. And so you get around it right now. So I don't know exactly where to stand. And I'm sure I would probably shave a few strokes off my game if I did. But whatever, and I'm 60 years old, I'm not learning anything, But the Gemara, the fundamentals are what they're not. It's not just the weaker children, it's every child. They don't. So in terms like what we did, I'm giving a series of classes now on my first Gemara book. You're all invited. You can send an email to events@thebrightbeginnings.com. We're doing classes now on beginner Gemara. I sent out an email of my firm belief that every single, I said after the first class, I designed a 55-minute class that anyone, religious, non-religious, no Gemara background, a bad experience in school. They're harder, actually. They don't want to touch a Gemara. They're traumatized by it. I can teach them how to learn Gemara from an art scroll in 55 minutes. I have a syllabus that it just teaches them the basics, how it came into being, who the people are, and how to read the whispers. I call it the whisperer. You need someone whispering in your ear, the background information that you need to know. Gemara is our craftsmen talking in their language. Okay, so if you went to a group of people who were bricklayers and they started talking, plumb lines and this and that, and you knew nothing about, if you sat there with them, you wouldn't know what's going on. So Gemara was that type of discussion. It starts on the 4th floor. So we start from the ground floor, and I tell them, you can get right up there. I did 2 pre-lessons, and tonight we're starting Gemara itself.
How many lessons are you planning online?
I plan to do probably another 6, 8, 10. I'm doing Yeshul Amidas, which, as you know, is such a difficult subject. But we're very excited. I got feedback. One of the people wrote me before the class that can he go? He said, I just can't pick up a Gemara because I had such a horrible experience in school. I don't know. I don't believe I'll ever be able to know it. And it's fundamentals that, and you asked me why schools don't do it. I don't blame principals for this one. Not because I'm a principal. The parents are driving the heads of school crazy. Because if you opened a school now in Chicago and you said, we're going to do everything that's educationally sound, we're going to delay the learning of Gemara, we'll learn more Mishnah, we're going to just learn Gemara, like you said, an hour or 2 hours. What are they going to say? Mutenki has a school for weaker kids, and nobody's going to send to your school.
And your Gemara
I shouldn't say nobody.
Yeah.
A small minority will.
And the books that you're producing now, how many have you done? And what Masechta, like what grade levels are they for?
So we have 2 books on beginner brachas, Masechta Brachas 4th Perek, and that is a full year of curriculum. So we have a full year of curriculum for brachas. Now we finished our first. Sorry.
What's the age level of that one?
Whenever they start,
Work high school or work elementary school?
The high school, the graphics are, geared for middle school kids, but I've had 60-year-olds buy the book, and they look at it and they say, why didn't anybody teach me this? They get so insulted and I'm telling you, they get so upset. Why didn't anybody tell me this? I want to hear something fascinating. I was at a Pesach program a few years ago, and I did that 55-minute class. It was entitled Your Son's Favorite Chavrusa, and I'm teaching parents who have no Gemara background how to learn. There was an 83-year-old man there who lives in the greater New York area. I'm going to get choked up. He came over to me in tears and furious. He said, I became a Baal Tshuva 60 years ago. He said, I'm a pretty bright guy. Don't tell me. He said, I'm at this Pesach program with 44 members of my family. That's a lot of zeros, right? And I'm able to afford this. I built up a business from scratch. He said, I went to Gemara classes. I didn't know what they were talking about. He said, my God, I could just do it right now. He said, where were you all my life? I said, where was I all my life? I didn't have me either when I was in yeshiva. But it's so frustrating. It's just learn the fundamentals. Stop. And we designed it to match the school's curriculum. Even though I believe, slow down or whatever it is, they could do this. If they just do it for a year like this, I believe that, it'll be a 9-day difference for the best kids. This is not a book for weaker children. Weaker children are helped more by it. But I'm telling you, everybody needs it, in my opinion.
You did brachos, and now you're which Masechta?
Now we're doing Baba Metzia, Elam Metzias, which is Yeshul Amidas. So we're about a third of the way through the project. We have 2 more books. We're about halfway through book number 2. The Yeshul Amidas took a year longer and so much more money because we invested in timelines and graphics and to give the kids every tool possible to track the Shakavatari, the logic of the Gemara. I'm working on a business plan. didn't say this in public. I think this is the first time I'm saying it in public. I'm preparing a business plan to do a full 4-year curriculum. I didn't have the, what do they call it in the business world? You know, I didn't have proof of concept until now. We sold over 20,000 books. I didn't take out a single ad yet, not a single one. And we're in over 100 yeshivas. So, you know, we clearly have proof of concept. I got requests to translate it to Yiddish, to Hebrew. So now what I would love to do, Lenny, before I hang up my sneakers, I would love to produce an educationally sound 4-year curriculum, maybe even through a larger one through high school, but at least 4 years. Probably the schools that learn slower could carry them through high school with a real curriculum. You know, we taught this skill in this grade. We do this, you know, you look at a secular textbook, the support materials they have, and the way things, times tables you do in 3rd grade, you know. So that's my dream, to be able to create something like this. And I'm not stopping till I do it.
That is the most encouraging piece, but we only have a few more minutes. But if you were looking out the next few years, what's going to be the biggest challenge we're going to have as a community in America?
I'll be a contrarian and say, I think it's the generational changes that folks who don't deal with kids don't realize. Today's kids, the Generation Z kids, are so much more tolerant. They're very, very different. They were raised with phones in their hands. And we haven't done this yet. We've been tinkering around with kids who played around with it a little bit. I think they're going to need to be taught differently. They're going to need to be able to ask questions. I think this generational shift, even something like LGBTQ issues, even the most Haredi circles across the board, the younger generation are so much more likely to say, look, I get it. I know what the Torah says. But a guy told me in Yiddish, a Hasidic fellow, he was talking, he came to me to ask me for help. He says, listen, you know, I keep all the mitzvahs, of course. He said, how can I judge what a person does? You know, I'm saying it's like a very, very different attitude. And it's everywhere. It's not just the inappropriate content. I think that's going to be our biggest challenge.
With that change. Well,
what?
Baruch Hashem, with that kind of challenge, we have people like you, Rabbi Yakov, who is going to help us and keep on nudging us in the right direction. We could go on for a very long time, but I am very much aware of your time, how precious it is, and how many more svarim you have to put out already. So I just all of us, I want to thank you for saving lives, for fighting the fight. I didn't even touch on the question of the libel suit you had to defend yourself against with an abuser in Israel, and continuing to have that smile that allows.
Thank you very much. I just want to tell the listeners, all of our books, the Hebrew books, are all on Amazon now. We just got them up last week. Wow. So if you go to Amazon and you just do Bright Beginnings, the Yakov Horowitz, or Brachas Elomatzias, if you search on Amazon, you'll pick up. We have all our Chumash books. We have Chumash books also. You can get them on Amazon. You can have them by tomorrow night.
And you said you haven't done any advertising yet.
I did not.
This is it.
I didn't take any print media ads.
Ah, okay. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure, Lenny. And I'm always available to come back.
And I appreciate it. Bye-bye. Have a great day. Thank you
so much. Be well.